Welcome to Wild Woman Network, radio for creative vagabonds, thinkers, and innovators. I am Sandra Lee Schubert, your host and consultant for artists, writers, and small business owners who want their message to be heard online or in person. Let me show you how at wildwomannetwork.com. Well, good day to everyone out there. I just want to let you know the chat room is open, so please feel free to ask questions or leave comments there for my guest today. My guest is Robert Fritz, who is an author and author of several books, Your Life is Art, Path of Least Resistance, and Creating, to name just a few. And he's also a composer and multi-talented person. And during the past 25 years, over 80,000 people in 27 countries have participated in trainings created by Robert Fritz. His insights on the creative process and structural dynamics serve as the foundation of meaningful and lasting change for both individuals and organizations. And his course, Structures, an online course on creating your life, is available at Wise Pond and is just a newly, I don't want to say updated, or a new course on his Creating Your Life. So I think one of the reasons I'm having Robert on today is, one, just to talk a little bit about this course, but also because I had read one of his blogs. He's got wonderful blogs over at wisepond.com, and one of the things that struck me was his section on you can't invest your life spirit in a compromise. So I asked Robert to sort of come on and discuss that because I thought it was really important. And if Robert would bear with me another moment, I'd like to read the first paragraph of that and then start our conversation. Robert's going to be with us for an hour today, so we have lots of time to sort of discuss all this and get to the meat of things. So this is the first paragraph from that particular post. For most of our lives, we are asked to compromise our dreams, our values, our hopes for the future, and to learn to live with what we don't actually want. This is called reasonable. The assumption that is just below the surface of this advice is that you can't have what you want, so learn to live with it. Don't want things, and you'll be happier and more well-adjusted. Why bang your head against the wall? Grow up and compromise, and all will be okay. You say, I read that and I'm thinking, it's supposed to be reasonable, but then you read that and you go, well, that doesn't sound very reasonable at all. So Robert, welcome to the show today, and I just
thank
you, and I just want to let our listeners know, when I've told Robert this, there is massive construction going on outside in the street and inside the building today. So if you hear pounding, pulverizing, crashing, banging, it is not anything that's happening with me. It is just the circumstances around me creating lots of havoc and noise. So don't fret if suddenly a crash happened. It really is not me. But Robert, really, I'm just very happy to have you here today. So let's talk about this. What do you mean by all this? What do you mean, Robert?
Well, I mean that there's a way that we have all grown up with the message that you can't have what you want. And that's accompanied by other messages about that you should, for example, do not what you want, but what you're good at, which is another message that we get from guidance counselors. You do some tests when you're 14, find out you're good at math. The guidance counselor says, therefore, you should have a life career of engineering. You go and study engineering, and you find out in your 40s that you never wanted to be an engineer. And the assumption there is because you happen to be good at something, that's what you should pursue. But the subtext for that is you can't learn. In other words, if you don't know something, you'll always not know it. If you're not good at something in the beginning, you'll always not be good at it, and that therefore you can't develop your talents or develop your interests. So therefore you just accommodate circumstances. And that leaves you one of two choices. You can either react against circumstances or respond to circumstances. But the circumstances of your life, rather than your choices, become the driving force, the organizing principle.
So you're saying instead of really sort of looking at life and say, well, what is it that I want to create? You just respond to the environment around you in one way or another, and that's that's interesting because that's one. You talk about people having midlife crisis and just reading the first paragraph. Why would we wonder about that? And this is I just had this conversation yesterday with a clergy member, and where I was talking about the idea that I realized I had not really questioned much of anything. It's like, just as a simple example, say I would agree to go somewhere, but I never really, I didn't even stop to think, do I really want to go to this place? What will, what is the benefit? Why would I, it's just sort of like, it's kind of just like I'm just agreeing to anything. Somebody says go there, I go there in some way. I mean, it seems like, no, that's not, how could anybody be that way? But I see that with a lot of people.
We are all encouraged to act that way. It's called reasonable, polite, sensible. And do you remember the famous Dorothy Parker story where she wrote a note to somebody who invited her to a party, and the note said, "I would love to want to come to your party. Unfortunately, I don't." In typical Dorothy Parker fashion. But at least she was aware of, wanting to want something, but she in fact was being true to herself. Well, and also with tongue-in-cheek, I might add.
With it is interesting because we were chatting about somebody who's sort of come back into my church life. I have this church life, and somebody was saying, well, why aren't you interested in what they're doing? And I said, really, because my past experience with this person has not been very good, and at this moment, I'm really just not interested in that kind of connection with that person. I'm just it's not really, in terms of my time and who I want to involve in my life. At this moment,
it's interesting the way you put that, because the question itself suggests that you should be interested. I think it was more of a rhetorical question. You should be interested. Why aren't you? Versus actually trying to find out from you why you happen not to be interested in something you're not interested in.
Right. Well, I know it. Well, it's that kind of interesting idea about curiosity. It's like, well, I'm curious. Why? What's that about? And eventually, we did get to that conversation down the road. But it was for me. What was interesting is that person just naturally assumed because this person was sort of back at the church that I should be kind of embracing that person. They kept saying, "Oh, he's doing this. Have you heard about that?" And I said, "No, I'm really not interested. I'm just not interested in what they're up to. I have other people I'm interested. I'm really just not interested because, and based on past experience, I don't know. I know this person not to be somebody I want to engage with. So I've opted to really not expend my energy in that direction.
And why not? There's a lot of social norms that try to tell us that we should make Faustian bargains.
Right. with everything. With everything.
But, big ones, but I think sometimes the small ones are just as debilitating and devastating as the large ones.
Right. Well,
because every time you make one of these little compromises, you are compromised. No, I want to make a distinction here, though, because there's a difference between doing things you don't want to do in support of other people. Mm-hmm. And that's a primary choice to a secondary choice. So, and that's still a choice, though. Choice means you can do it or not do it. It's not an obligation. So years ago, I would go, my wife's English, and we would go to England, and I'd be very happy to support her in seeing her family, even though, from the standpoint of was it an enjoyable event? For me, the answer would be no. But the point is that I wasn't going out of obligation. I was going out of support for Rosalind, and that's a secondary to a primary choice. A lot of times we do things we don't want to do on a local level to support some higher interest or some hierarchical interest, and
right.
that's not a compromise. You know, you're not compromising your values, your integrity. You're simply supporting what is most important to you.
That's right, and that I think is a distinction, because I think a lot of times people just kind of, you know, I have my favorite expression lately is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, it's sort of making a very wide stroke decision and not looking for the nuances of other levels within that decision. So you just kind of say, I'll never speak to anybody again without really sort of investigating that. I mean, even with this person that I'm choosing not to engage with, it wasn't, this is not just a gut reaction. I had to sit there for a little bit and really work that out for myself and really make a decision.
I think a deeper point though is you're free to make that decision and nobody else gets the vote.
Right. Well, that's the interesting question, because there was an element within that conversation of somebody really wanting to vote on my decision.
This is where we live in this world where everybody wants to vote on decisions that are in many ways personal and not for public debate.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I have a lot of people have a lot of conversation because they want to know what I'm doing in terms of creating. They don't ask what I'm doing in terms of creating work, but they're just in there all the time, and I'm kind of like, really, I don't want to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
This is not. I don't want to have a conversation.
There's another aspect of this too, in terms of compromise. Sometimes, particularly when we think about it from the standpoint of the arts. There are things which are not compromises, but which are practical. I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear about this. Let me take two on this. I'm making a film right now, a feature film, and we're shooting it very fast, and we're doing a lot of things that if we were doing this in Hollywood, they would never do. And the way I'm thinking about it is this is more like a process that's akin to watercoloring versus oil painting or egg tempera. And there's a certain kind of energy that happens because of that process. Now, in some ways, somebody could say, well, you're compromising the light in this shot, or you're compromising this or that. And quite frankly, those things are so unimportant to me. As long as it's workable, I'm not trying to have it be perfect. I'm trying to have it be right, if you understand what I mean. And to me, that is an example of investing in something that's not a compromise, even though there are secondary choices that I make along the way, in which I'm not creating something that would be more perfect. But then again, I'm not interested in it. So perfect. I'm interested in being powerful.
Right. So that's your choice in that. So if somebody wanted to sort of go somewhere else with that, and for them their value was in the light, let's say, and that's where they were going for.
Yeah, sure.
That they have to make other kind of choices around that, and that's right. Right for them in that moment. So can you talk?
Just to say that some people have a perfectionist thing, and they'll take what I've said about you can't invest your life spirit in compromise. They'll translate that into some kind of be perfect and never have rough edges.
And never compromise? And just never compromise at all? I'm never going to compromise because Robert Fritz said...
Yeah, but they're missing my point.
Right.
You're being true to yourself by not being a slave to perfection.
Right, and it's a little. Well, let's talk a little bit about people creating.